The Mikey Bet Show, the Mikey Bet Show. Do you know the Mikey Bet Show?
Tino Antonacci made nothing but money off me. I'd be at Basta Pasta at 2 a.m. with 4 or 5 guys. We'd be off. There's no way he's going to get on the air tomorrow. No way. This one I was working from 10 to 2. Tino would go, I'll bet you $100 right now. He's on the air tomorrow, and you won't even notice that he was out. So I'd come on. Hey, everybody, Mike North here on WSCR, The Score, along with Dan Jiggets. Mike, how you doing today? I'm doing good, Jigs. Everything going good. What'd you do last night? I was on the world tour last night. But you know me, when the red light goes on, and then we'd go to a break and go, oh. And then we'd go back on. Bing, bang, boom. Right? Because nobody driving that's listening to me or any of the guys at The Score wanted to hear that shit, that you're hungover. Nobody wants to hear that. Hey, everybody, we're Metallica. We're tired from last night. They don't do that. Hey, I'm Mick Jagger. We're going to put on a show if we can, but we were out late last night, right? Hey, Sinatra, last night I was drunk till 4 a.m. We'll try to give you what you want. They just go out and do it. I live large.
Hey everybody, it's Aldo Gandhi, and I just want to let you know really quickly that our swag shop is reopened. DeepDishTees.com is where you go, and that's tees with T-E-E-S. Clever name, guys. They're the new home of our merchandise. You can get t-shirts, you can get caps, you can get coffee mugs, you can get hoodies, you can get all sorts of good stuff, and you'll help out the bar room with the purchase. So head over to DeepDishTees.com.
Hey, this is David Kaplan from the Cap J Hood Show on ESPN 1000 and NBC Sports Chicago. Now get ready to listen and watch to Bulls 101 with Chris and Laro. Take that, Sparkles.
What's up, guys? Welcome to Bulls 101. This is Chris Amundsen, Laro Golden. We got a special guest tonight. As you can see on the screen, our guy Rob Schaefer from NBC Sports Chicago, who has agreed to join us late in the evening before an early flight tomorrow to catch the end of Summer League. Rob, how you doing? I just wanted to make sure we could get your opinions here before you go interview Patrick Williams. I wish we could do it myself. I wish we could do it myself, but how you doing tonight?
I'm good, guys. Like we were talking about before we came on, it's good to meet you face to face, kind of chop it up. Long appreciated the work and perspective that you guys provide for Bulls Twitter. So any time of night, no matter what the schedule is, I'm always happy to do it.
Man, like I said it to you before we went live, but man, I truly appreciate you. And I'm sure you heard this multiple times because you are on a lot of shows. But man, I appreciate the time that you give, man, because you do so much great work for the Bulls and giving information to us that is just so great and in detail. And I love that about you. And I just want to say thanks for coming on the show, man. It's gonna be some fun to be able to chop it up with some chop it up about the Bulls with you, man. It's gonna be fun.
I'm blushing. I'm humbled. But I always appreciate you saying that, Larry.
No doubt, man.
So if you guys don't know who Rob Schaefer is, first of all, crawl out of the rock you've been living under and go listen to the Bulls Talk podcast that Rob is with Casey Johnson, who you guys know has been a longtime Chicago Tribune writer, now with NBC Sports Chicago, and Tony Gill behind the scenes, the producer, and Jason Goff obviously as a showrunner. It's great. It's great fun. It's always recorded. You never know what's going to happen. So that's always a great time. But I love the perspective that you bring, Rob. You four just kind of bring different viewpoints, you approach the game in different ways. And so I definitely feel more akin to to your opinions. And I'm always like, yes, Rob, thank you for saying this or that during these shows. What's up? AK fan clubs in here.
Hey.
Well, Come to catch us.
Always love seeing that Avi popping up everywhere.
Well, AK's made a lot of moves this offseason, so we wanted to talk to you about the different moves and kind of the Bulls' place in the East, and there's still some pending things going on right now. But first, I know you're headed out to Summer League in the morning. I was there a week ago Sunday. I didn't get to catch the Bulls, but it was fun to be there nonetheless. So I know you talked about a little bit on the Bulls Talk podcast, but what have you seen so far from Patrick Williams, Ayo Dosunmu, and Marko Simonovic that you've liked or disliked or encouraging things so far?
Yeah, I'll take them one by one. I think Pat, I've been pretty encouraged by, if nothing else. I mean, we don't, nobody gets deep into the weeds on stats or anything like that in a summer league context. But the three numbers that I would cite for him that I've really liked are 20, 23, 15. Just the amount of shot attempts that he's taken in these 3 games. I like that he's actually kind of realized what his role is on this team, which is if you look at the roster beyond Patrick Williams, it seems like a roster built for him to control the majority of offensive possessions. There just isn't a ton else there. So I've liked seeing him, grab the reins with a little bit more usage. The results have been mixed, obviously. But just seeing him, even these occasional flashes, I mean, he's still 19 years old. We're still working off flashes here. But just seeing him be able to step in and hit off the dribble threes occasionally, get to a spot in the mid-range. I still think he could get to the rim, to the top of the rim a little bit more. But getting to the foul line with some forceful drives. They're putting him in pick and roll. The passing flashes are obviously there. I like to see him pulling down 9 to 12 rebounds a game. Also, just because he figures to be the starting power forward for this team, I think that's a position that will suit him well. I think that's going to be his best NBA position, but a lot of that is still theoretical at this point. So it's just been good to see a lot of Patrick Williams. And has he taken bad shots? Yes. Have there been moments where it hasn't looked the greatest? Yes. But the reps are going to be valuable. He's talked about that ad nauseum. And also just the reps being a leader on the team. I mean, we can't get all the way behind the scenes, but just listening to guys like Ayo and Damian Cotter talk about how hard Pat was on himself after the first game and how he took it upon himself to be more consistent in game 2 and talk to the team in game 2 and be kind of a guy who is looked to by others in huddles, in prep sessions and things like that. That's just all good experience for Pat, good developmental experience, even if the role isn't going to be exactly the same with the actual Bulls. From Ayo and Marko, it's been good to get first impressions of each of them. Obviously, we've all watched a lot of Ayo just from being a U of I, but to see him against NBA adjacent competition, I think it's illuminated kind of how much development is going to need to be done there. But when he was at his best, it was kind of getting into things, mucking things up defensively, getting out in transition. He really is lightning fast. But in terms of the shot making and just being able to match up physically, I think that might take a little bit of time. Don't want to overreact to Summer League, but that's just my initial impression. And then Marko, I watched a decent amount of his Adriatic League stuff, as much as I could at least. And it's a little bit different here, the usage, but you just see if he is going to turn into a rotation level big, you see how it's going to happen, right? He seems pretty physical, scraps on the glass, runs the floor pretty well. I think as he develops, he's going to be pretty fast for a 6'11" guy. Gets up and down the floor in transition, keeps his hands up and things like that. They were running some stuff through him at the elbows that looked like, okay, there are passing flashes there. It looks like he can handle the ball a little bit, grabbing and going. So you see the nuggets of the skill set that intrigued the Bulls. But another guy that, we can get into this when we get to kind of what still needs to be done with this roster. I think the Bulls would be best served if they weren't relying on him for 15 to 20 minutes a game, to be really, really effective as a reserve in the front court. Hopefully they can beef up that unit a little bit more. But I think more than Ayo, I've probably been encouraged by Marko in terms of him carving out a rotation role sooner rather than later. I think the Bulls using that remainder of the mid-level on him as opposed to the minimum slot for Ayo probably tells you that they feel the same way, locking him up for 3 years. But overall, it's just been fun to watch these guys, right? I think there's some good, there's some bad. I would say I've been mostly encouraged by the stuff I've seen from Pat and Marko. And it'd be interesting to see where it goes from here. I'm curious to see how much more we even see of Pat, to be honest with you, just with what he's shown in 3 games. I'm curious if they see the need to run him out there for the next 2 or 3. But either way, it'll be fun to watch and to see maybe some of the lower run guys, see if any of these guys can stick for a camp deal or something like that.
I first of all, with Pat, right? So Pat has been it's been great. I totally agree with you. Like, it's been great to see him kind of be aggressive and take those shots. And I think a lot of people are like, they get down on him because he's missing these shots, and they look at the percentages, and I'm like, guys, just him taking those amount of shots is the right steps forward, right? Him getting that in his DNA, that like the Bulls, they're going to be good. They also need you to be aggressive when you have the chances, the opportunities with your touches. Like they need you to be aggressive and build that mindset. And that has been great. And I loved against San Antonio when he had a couple touches in the mid post, and he just looks so confident there. You take a guy off the dribble with the floater, gets to a mid range. Like, I just loved what I saw from him. And I'm a crazy person, and I probably watched maybe 9 or 10 games of Marco in the ABA, in the Adriatic League, and I came away like kind of the same thing, right? He's a big that can grab it off the glass. He can take it up the court. He's really fast for his size. He does compete on the glass, but I just wasn't overly impressed, I guess, in a way. But seeing him in the summer league, you can see like, okay, there's certain points where he can be useful, like dribble handoffs. I did see some passing flashes even in ABA games, but you just didn't know because obviously the talent level. So it's been kind of cool to see some of those flashes. And I mean, I hope that 3-year deal means they do believe in him, and hopefully there are some things. Hopefully he does grow into a big that's useful, and you can depend on him for 15, 20 minutes a game because he is producing. But I guess I'm not willing to bet on it. I guess I just have like I don't know, just watching so many games of him, and I don't know. That's where I'm at right now. But I can totally see just from certain flashes, like, okay, this dude has some talent, right? And Io, like we had we evaluated him in 2 episodes ago, and I thought that like that's what popped off even on his Illinois tape was using his wingspan and fighting over screens, tapping the ball away, getting some steals, getting out on the break, and using the speed to finish on the other end. And I think some people were blind. I hate to sound like this, but I think some people saw like, oh man, this dude was balling out. Some people said he was the best player in college last year at a point in the season, and they see him now in the summer league, and they're like, and I think you're right. It illuminated like, okay, this dude is not what he's not that primary guy at this level, at least right now, but I think what he can do and what he can be helpful to this team is being a defensive guy, being a guy that can guard and muck it up, like you said, and get on the break and create opportunities that way. But again, like you said, Chris has talked about this as well. Like you kind of don't want to depend on Io as much, So that's just what I say.
And let's be real, right? I mean, these are 2nd round picks, and we can have high hopes for them and see potential. But we've always, I think most people should have expectations tempered, and it's kind of just a wait and see thing with them.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, I'll echo both of you guys on this. I love Pat's aggressiveness. I mean, he would try and do drives to the rim or get into the paint, and he'd get stripped a bunch of times. Like he had a bunch of turnovers. But I love the footwork. I love what he's doing. I love the aggressiveness. His 3-point shot looks smooth. It looks. I mean, he's still slower, but it's.
Yeah, but you got blocked on that one. He got blocked on that one. I think it was the
yeah.
That was in the first game, but yeah.
But the form always looks pretty. I feel like a couple of them he kind of hesitates and then decides to shoot. Zach does that a bunch too, but Zach does it, I feel like, for different reasons. Zach's trying to get him up in the air or something. Whereas Pat's he's a little nervous, and he's like, "Oh, should I take the shot?" But yeah, I was encouraged. Io on the defensive end, Marco, you can see the offensive talent, you can see the footwork, you can see he's got skill. He doesn't get real high when he jumps, that's for sure. Yeah. And so he got stuffed at the rim a few times, and I think he'll take some time to adjust. But you can see the skill there, and so I agree with you there. But we hope you have a good time at Summer League tomorrow.
Wait, let me guys ask you one Marco question before we move off this. What do you guys think of the jumper? Because I remember watching some of the Adriatic League stuff, and he could get hot, but at the end of the day, the results over a long sample were kind of like 32, 33%, decent volume, 4 or 5 attempts a game. You know, you don't want to take too much away from Summer League, right? But it didn't really even look like he was looking to shoot that much. I think he was 0-4 in the last game they played. Some of the attempts looked a little short. I just think could be a pretty sizable swing skill for him, and I'm wondering what you guys have kind of seen from that.
Yeah, I think so.
Go ahead. Did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, and I'll let you lead off on the other one. But with Io, a lot of it was in the paint. A lot of the stuff he was trying was in the paint. He tried to dunk on a bunch of people, but you saw when he was taking those threes, he was kind of short and flat. He didn't quite have the range there. And I don't know if it was partially the ball they're using or just that, obviously it's a further distance. But I think you're right. I think that's the swing skill. If he can, I know people think he's going to come in and be like some sort of like Lowry replacement. I really wish people would kind of step off that train. That's not going to happen.
The Lowry discourse has gotten a little too far. The
pendulum has swung the opposite way. We went from super hyped and now it's like, can't wait to get this bump. Like I can't take the Lowry stuff. And the longer this drags on, I feel like the worse it's going to get. But Lowry is a valuable rotation piece in the NBA. Marco, I would love for Marco to be Lowry one day, but that's not an expectation I think we should have as Bulls fans. So, but as far as the jumper, Larry, if you want to, you've been looking at the form a little bit more than I have when you were watching the Adriatic League.
Even if you look at his, like you said, the percentages, I think he was 34.7% or something like that for his career in the ABA. Or it might have been just the last season, but
I think he was 32 last season. You might be right about the career. Yeah.
And I think somebody brought it up. It might have been Celine from Bulls Gold. Shout out Celine and Edward. But he might have to adjust his form and get it up a little bit higher. Because I think that is something that may be affecting that right now. I think he might eventually have to get that lifted up a little bit, get that form up a little bit higher, that release, I should say. Because I think a part of it is, like Chris is saying, like the ball obviously is a little bit, it's a little heavier in the distance. But I think you're right. The swing skill, if he can be a pick and pop guy that can really truly garner like some big time attention, not leaving him open in the corner or above the break. He could be really useful because there were some clips like I watched against Chibona, against Rocco. He was able to catch and rip and get by Rocco off the dribble, and he was making the right pass. So I saw that it's there, right? But in the NBA, if you're not respected, you're not going to get a hard closeout. If anything, they're going to short close out and stay in front of you. So he has to knock that down, like you said. He has to.
That's the reason I asked, is because in the third game, there was a moment in the third quarter where he got a hard closeout and he drove it. He took 2 dribbles and he kicked to Io in the corner. And it was like, I think the only field goal Io made of the game was a corner 3. And I was like, there's something, these little ball handling moments. Like there's something there. Like if he could attract that attention, if he makes enough where he actually needs to be guarded at the NBA level. Obviously that stuff could just unlock a ton, but getting ahead of myself there after I think he's taken 5 attempts in summer league so far, so maybe getting a little ahead of myself there.
We do have one question. I don't know.
I was going to say Ross had a question about Dotson and Io running them together. So we actually saw this. So the question is, do you think running Dotson and Io together was detrimental for Io from a fit standpoint? Well, Dotson did go out with that ankle injury, and so I think you saw a little bit of Io and Pat a little bit more on the ball. And I don't know if it was detrimental. I mean, Dotson was really, really good at getting into the paint and making stuff happen and getting the defense into rotation. And you saw how much that changed after he went out of the game. Yeah. They couldn't generate buckets. So if it wasn't Pat doing something, they weren't doing anything else.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you guys think about that when they were together, but definitely without Dotson, it was not good.
You want to take that, Rob? Or?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a strong opinion on it just because the sample is so small. I don't really know what, an additional X amount of time for Io on ball in summer league would have done for him potentially. I think he'll get plenty of time doing that in a developmental perspective as we go on here. I'm just so focused on the defensive end for Io because I just really think, and I think he knows this too, based on how he's talked about his summer league experience so far and what he knows he has to do to get on the floor at the NBA level as fast as he can. I'm just so much more focused on that because I see that as being the kind of thing that will get him the opportunity to begin with. And then the offensive stuff, I think, can come when it comes. So, I mean, in a summer league environment for a guy that's just coming into the league, all reps are good reps. So I guess you could say that maybe if they had spent more time apart, getting the ball into Io's hands, whatever the results were, might have been better for him in the long run. But like you were saying, Chris, the offense was just running so much better with Dotson out there. You saw it down the stretch of the Spurs game when he, that possession that ended in the assist to Pat for the dunk. Like Dotson, as much as he didn't get much run last year, like he clearly belonged, and he clearly looked like someone that had a year of NBA/G League experience under his belt already. So I don't know. I suppose you could say that just because all reps would have been good reps for Io, but in the spirit of the team, having its wheels greased and actually functioning, it probably was better for Dotson to be out there. And now that he's back on a two-way, you hope that ankle injury that he suffered isn't anything serious. We'll see if he can get back out there before we wrap up here.
On the Dotson front, I have a question for you. So I'll give you a little bit of the background. Somebody that me and Chris knows may have said, well, you know what? We'll just put it this way. What do you think? What do you think was the reason Dotson did not play as much last year? Because there was a big deal on Twitter about Dotson not getting any time. Like, why is he not playing? We're not going to be in the playoffs anyway. Why is he not playing? Do you have anything about that?
Yeah, I don't know if the implication is that there was something nefarious going on there. I'm not sure about that necessarily. I think this regime and Billy have so stressed the value of shooting that when I watch Dotson down in the G League, and even like you look at the percentages or watch him at Kansas, I just don't know that from a shooting perspective they necessarily thought he was there. And then there are other things, just being a little bit undersized definitely hurts him. And while there are virtues to his game that I think can give him utility on the NBA court in the long term, like he's really quick getting downhill, a pretty good finisher when he can, find space or cracks or place to use his craft and do so. I hate to say that the guard rotation was so deep that they couldn't have found minutes for him last year, because Arch was like starting games at one point. As much as I love Arch, but yeah, I just don't know that they thought that he was ready. I mean, that would be the easiest answer there. The fact that they at one point said that sending him down to the G League bubble because they didn't send the Windy City Bulls wasn't a part of their plans, and then a month later he was down there for basically the entire time. It just made me think that they thought that he needed more time. But I guess I'm not 100% positive, because frankly, he just wasn't much of a topic of conversation around the team or, talking to coaches or players last year, because he was just so on the periphery. But I don't know. If you guys have a theory, I'm totally open to it, because like you said, I mean, especially when Zach went out and the plan was just such a distant specter, like couldn't have hurt, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we were one of that, because I mean, you mentioned the lack of shooting, the inexperience, right? Maybe he just wasn't ready. But one of the things that we really lacked as a team last year, other than Zach, was rim pressure, and that's something that Dotson really, really excelled at. So I think that was what kind of the fervor on Twitter was about. Was, hey, I mean, we need rim pressure. We already know what Arch does. Why aren't we giving Dotson a shot? And we kind of heard the same thing that you did, which is basically like they weren't quite sure that the lack of shooting. They just thought lack of shooting might have been a bigger issue, and they kind of knew what Arch was providing, and he had that experience. Obviously, Arch is like a coach's
every coach is gonna love Arch. That's it's and honestly, and Cody Westerville and I used to joke about this. Our seating was not the same media wise last year as it usually is. Usually you sit either behind the basket or down in kind of like the 100 level. Right. Last year they were kind of up 200 level, like a little bit raised. But you could still see, man, Arch is at the front of the bench, standing up, clapping, barking at refs all game. Like it's all cliche. It's everyone that you could think of, but good for morale.
He stepped right into that Kirk Heinrich role when he got here. Just, like Tibbs used Kirk Heinrich for years after he probably shouldn't have. And Arch just is loved by coaches. So, but, let's get into the offseason additions, because now we do have more rim pressure. We've got DeMar DeRozan, who excels at drawing fouls, getting to the basket. And he kind of fulfills we went over a bunch of film last week for like an hour and a half, 2 hours about the different sets that they could run or how they can kind of integrate this offense. But they've really upgraded the talent on this roster. And that was the biggest thing I thought going into this offseason was, without the cap space, how are we going to add talent? And
I was asking the same question, man.
Right. and we talked to Darnell about this at the trade deadline after they traded for Vooch, like traded 2 first-round picks and shipped out Wendell, who was, still a promising young player. And thank you for all of your Wendell love this season. He did not get enough of it, and was
Jalen Suggs going to make him an all-star, man.
I am so happy, because when he got shipped to Orlando, I was like, man, they don't have a point guard there either. Like, he really needs someone to set him up on offense to really take advantage. But I agree with you. I think Suggs is going to be great for him. But anyways, we could spend hours on Wendell, but we won't do that to you tonight. So with all these additions, you mentioned Ayo's where Ayo can contribute is the defensive end. So a lot of national people have said, hey, I think the offense is going to be a lot better, right? It finished like 19th, I think, in the league last year, and we were 12th in defense. Yeah. Obviously, with adding DeMar, he kind of fulfills almost that point guard role, the primary ball handler and creator. And I think this is a great spot for DeMar to be next to Lonzo, next to Caruso, Zach, Vooch, Patrick Williams, Kobe, all these guys that can really shoot it, and also are all fairly good passers. I mean, like, the worst passer of that bunch is probably Pat, and he's still a pretty darn good passer. So I just wanted to see what you've heard of what you've kind of in your conversations with Casey or other beat writers. What's been your take on the offseason moves, and what do you think? There's still some holes, I think, on this roster, and the Lowry thing is yet to resolve itself. Where do you see the biggest weaknesses?
Ooh, weaknesses. Yeah, I think it's front court depth for sure. And obviously, I think they'll be a pretty potent offensive team. I mean, top 5 to 8 in the league at least is probably the bottom of the neighborhood that you would expect to be in for them if they want to get where they want to get to. Yeah, I don't buy, like, as much as I in the moment and will stand by being critical of the actual transaction of getting DeMar, just like the trade itself and the contract itself. The player is the notion that the player is not a good fit in DeMar DeRozan. I just don't agree with, because, like you said, you can surround him with shooting in the half court. He certainly functions as like a lead ball handler, a point guard, whatever you want to call him. Has never been, or I don't think he's ever had a turnover rate that was below average for his position. So that right there addresses a crucial weakness. The foul drawing addresses a crucial weakness that AK hit on at the end of the season. Stagger him and Zach. I mean, look at from any season since Zach has really ascended to star status, the on-off splits offensively. Obviously, defensively, things get a little wonky and people get on him for that. But offensively, I think the ability to stagger those two guys is going to be massive. Obviously, Vooch too. So the talent upgrade has been big. The just mentality, like, I think it's a cliche that gets used, but just the willingness to lose the quote unquote transaction to get more competitive, to upgrade the talent, to act like a quote unquote big market team is certainly refreshing and exciting. And when you talk about the amount of shooting that you're going to be able to put around a guy like DeMar, a guy like Vooch, a guy like Zach, there's so much off the dribble creation. There's so much attention that's going to be drawn by those guys that I think you'll see the best out of guys like Pat, Kobe, kind of even Lonzo at times, kind of the supplementary or complementary players. But weaknesses wise, I mean, yeah, it's front court depth. I still see a glaring need for a backup 4, maybe 2. Like a guy like Millsap at the minimum or something like that is something that I'd be looking very hard at. Obviously, we don't know how this Lowry thing is going to shake out at this point, but we'll see. Defensively, while I'm more bullish than thinking they're going to be a 25 to 30th ranked unit there, because I think the point of attack defense is going to be a little bit better and you'll see some ripples from that. there is certainly on the wing, you need a big jump from Pat or things could get patchy. So we'll see. Before I go too hard on them being a poor defensive team, I want to see how it all looks in practice. I feel pretty confident about the offensive fit being pretty tidy. But if there's going to be a shortcoming of this team, it's going to be on the defensive end. And to me, the only thing stopping them from being a 4 to 6 seed in the East next year is not being in the top 20 defensively. I think if they can sustain and be in the 15 to 20 range, I don't see any reason why they can't be near the top of kind of the, and this is kind of getting into a conversation we're going to get to later, but the top of kind of that nebulous middle tier of, Atlanta, Boston, New York, things like that. So overall, the business side of some of these transactions, I think I admire the aggression. Obviously, I think they, have been certainly zealous in some cases, maybe a little bit overzealous in terms of the actual transaction itself. But basketball wise, they've assembled a roster that is completely different from when they took over the front office. That is, and it's one that I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about. And for any, hardline critiques of the moves that it took to get us there, we're going to have to see just what it looks like in practice, because there's just no way to know the ceiling of this group until we see that. But yeah, that's pretty much what I've gleaned. And the biggest thing I could say is just, I'm sure from a fan's perspective, certainly from a reporter's perspective, who's been covering the team for 2 years and 2 pretty kind of drudgy years at times, I'm just excited to see it in practice.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. The one thing I brought up with Will Gottlieb when we had Will Gottlieb on is that I think one of the biggest things that could help the defense in a way is if we're that top 5, top 8 offense, making a team have to grab the ball out of the basket, as much as possible during the game and not giving up fast break opportunities, not turning the ball over, taking care of the ball, and making teams have to score on a set defense. I think that could help potentially.
That's a great point.
So
that was so much of their issue last year. I
mean,
so many live ball turnovers.
Yeah.
So many just dribbling off your foot kind of stuff. You're like,
guys, what are we doing? What are we doing? Man. We have a question.
Last season was painful.
Another question from our Tours fan club. Would Lonzo potentially become dissatisfied being used in a similar role that he was last season?
This is a great question, and something that it's the problem with Zoom press conferences. I tried to follow up on this because Lonzo did talk a little bit in his presser about, he was diplomatic about it, but you can tell that the quote unquote 3-and-D role that he played in New Orleans last year was not his preferred role. Like, you can tell that he sees himself as a guy that's going to have the ball in his hands, that's going to push pace. But at the same time, we know that Lonzo Ball is an incredibly useful basketball player in the role that he was playing in New Orleans last year. And that's kind of how he fits into the roster as it stands right now with the Bulls. So I really wanted to ask him about that, and the conference got cut short. I'm going to the next time we talk to him, but I don't know that I have an answer to that question because we don't know exactly how things are going to look yet. There are little subtle tea leaves from the beginning of his presser where he's talking about playing more of a conventional point guard role with the Bulls and looking forward to that. So I'm just, this isn't necessarily an answer, but that sentiment has been in the back of my mind too. And I'm really, really fascinated to see how he fits into this, because DeMar has kind of just been talked about as the de facto primary playmaker in a half-court setting, and with good reason, because like we said, averaged a career high in assists last year, really, really has grown as a playmaker, never been a high turnover guy. And because of his, deficiency as an outside shooter, just putting the ball in his hands and surrounding him with shooting just makes a ton of sense. But I'll be fascinated to watch that from Lonzo, because certainly he seems thrilled to be in Chicago now and for the fresh start. But if things devolve into, his role, that is, devolve into what it was in New Orleans last year, I'll just be very interested to see what happens. He doesn't seem like a boat rocker, but it'll just be interesting to watch.
I think one thing we can take some confidence in is Billy Donovan has had experience and success with dealing with multiple point guards, right? With his rotation in OKC, with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Dennis Schroeder, and obviously Chris Paul, running those 3-guard lineups. And I think we've got so much versatility with our ball handlers and our guards now. I mean, Alex Caruso fits seamlessly into basically any lineup. You can run DeMar with the whole bench unit and just cook. He's going to have so much fun. And Zach, I mean, Zach working off ball, I think that's going to be a cheat code. Him's
dude, he's like a
gravity
30% 3-point shooter and catch and shoot. It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous.
He's a supernova. I just, man. Yeah, so I don't have as many doubts about it, because I think you're right, Rob. You put the ball in DeMar's when they're all on the floor together. I think you put the ball in DeMar's hands primarily, but Zach and Kobe. Zach and Kobe and Lonzo all have the capability to take over some ball handling responsibilities. So I think it's a great problem to have.
Yeah,
no one does it, man. We just have too much playmaking. I just wish we had less smart passers and less people who can create their own shot. I've never heard that. Like the whole heliocentric offense thing. Someone talked about this the other day I was listening to. Like, heliocentric offense is like this become the standard for some reason. But how many championships have really been won in that kind of style? It's like LeBron James and like the Bucks didn't do that. The Raptors didn't do that. The Warriors didn't do that. The Spurs didn't do that. But
it didn't work out. They ended up having to lean on Chris more.
So you got these Luka and Trey, who are incredible talents. But but even with Brooklyn, they've got 3 guys who want the ball in their hands, and they seem to have no issues on offense last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a problem that's good to have. I'm curious. Yeah, I would love you to ask a question of Lonzo next time you see him and talk to him.
I just am curious, and he seems like a very diplomatic guy in press conference dealings, but I'll be curious to hear his perspective on that. The other thing I'd say about Billy, in addition to into his experience handling multiple point guards and kind of making that work lineup wise, which was a great point. In addition to that, for whatever critiques anybody wants to levy at Billy, and I'm sure there will be some this year because the expectations are so much higher. He's such a good relationships guy that I actually would have a pretty solid amount of faith that if there are any things that need to be assuaged, he's pretty well equipped to do it. I mean, think about some of the bumps that last season hit with, having to take Kobe and Lowry out of the starting lineup, just soothing egos after the Vooch trade happened and everything had to be shaken up. Now, obviously, the on-court results weren't satisfactory after that, but you never saw like a locker room fracture or a locker room blow up or anything like that. So with the emphasis that the front office has put on the relationships thing and just how good Billy Donovan has proven to be at every stop in his career, and from my eye, has proven to be pretty good at it with the Bulls too. I think that's something that will serve them well, if anything were to ever come up, related to that.
I think that's such a great point to bring up, because I think that's one of the things that being a college coach and being really good and being a national championship coach that you bring to the NBA, right? When you're recruiting, you're getting guys that are number one from their state or number one in the nation. And how are you going to get these guys to become a team? And maybe Johnny from Illinois is so used to getting 25 shots a game. Now you got to find a way to bring him in. Like, hey, I need you to maybe drop that down to 10, right? So I think that experience has helped him in a way of how to handle those situations of like, hey, Larry, I got to sit you down, bud, or hey, Kobe, hey, we got to sit you down. Sato's gonna start, I think those types of situations, handling, egos with kids coming in, helped. I think that helped a lot. And I love that about it. I think that's one of the things you have to have as a coach. Obviously, it's a job when you get to NBA. So even if you don't like your coach or if you don't like your teammates, you still have to perform to your best of your ability. But I think that's such a great thing to have as a coach, where you can pull the troops together, in terms of fighting for one goal. And I think that's one thing that Billy does well.
And winning cures all too, right? So
exactly.
DeMar mentioned this in his presser. Like it's a collection of almost like misfit guys who, like, a lot of these guys haven't necessarily won at a high level in their NBA careers. Like Vooch has been a guy that's been to the first round a couple times. I actually think he was in the second round once with like the 76ers when he was a rookie or a second year player. But Zach's obviously never been to the postseason. Lonzo, I don't think, has been either. DeMar has been to the second round a couple times, but you have to trust that the unified mission of these guys is going to lead to that working itself out too. And if this team is as good as the Bulls believe they could be, and a lot of people believe they could be, then that stuff is going to be easier to smooth over than if you're on, a sub 500 Pelicans team or a sub 500 Bulls team or any sub 500 team. So that could be a dynamic of it too.
There was a question, Chris. Did you see the question I was looking at? Maybe?
About Paul Millsap?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this. So Drew Castillo asked, has Paul Millsap's stock fallen since this last season? I was wondering why more teams aren't bidding for him. My understanding is there are some teams bidding for him. I mean, there's been radio silence on it, but Paul Millsap, I think, would be a really, really great addition at the backup for us.
I agree.
I just love I can't believe, first of all, what AK has done this offseason. I made a joke before free agency started that we were going to have 3 sign-in trades. I said we're going to have a sign-in trade with Tice going out, sign-in trade with Lowry going out, and a sign-in trade to get Lonzo Ball. And I was joking. I was like, that's not going to happen. All 3 of them happened. Well, 2 for 3. One of them was that, and Lowry still might be a sign-in trade. We might get 4.
Yeah.
And the Alex Caruso traded player exception thing, I thought was a possibility for a little bit too. Obviously, the BYC rules killed that. Unfortunately, screw that BYC rule. But yeah, I mean they've been JJ Polk and company have really pulled off a great talent acquisition this summer. But I just love
that BYC rule came in handy with Lonzo, but
it did right. Yeah, so it's a give and take.
Yeah.
But I just love that our offense now is so complete. It's so there's no clear holes on the offensive end anymore. You got 2 guys that can get to the rim and draw fouls with Zach and DeMar. You've got a post presence in Vooch who can also pick and pop out to the 3-point line and effectively. You've got Lonzo Ball, who's an excellent transition creator. And then you've got DeMar, who's an excellent half court creator. That was one of the reasons we were like, oh man, if you bring Lonzo Ball in, I hope you guys aren't saying that's going to solve all the offensive, all the half court offense problems. But DeMar and having both of them together, man, it's just, you got Kobe and Ross, Arturo's fan club. He mentioned this too. Troy Brown Jr., I think, is going to be key at the wing on the defensive end. Io's going to hopefully, I was impressed with Io's length. And Tony Bradley is a really, really productive backup big. I know people like to say that he gave Wendell the business in this one game. That's not true. Go watch the tape. But he did get a couple buckets on him. No, he's good. But I think, Rob, if Lowry does get shipped out, and so I want to kind of transition to this.
Yeah.
I've been a little surprised at the reports that have come out. I understand why they want a first-round pick. I mean, why not? Why not ask for that, I guess, to try and recoup the one you lost. But there were reports that Lowry may have been going to San Antonio and ended up switching it at the last minute and shipping out Thad, because Thad would have been, man, if they had kept Thad and sent out Lowry in that trade, I would be like, we are golden.
Yeah.
But they're asking for no salary back, and that kind of confuses me a little bit. Now, maybe they've got someone in the wings that they're going to use the traded player exception on there, have a trade ready to bounce with that. But I'm a little concerned because the teams that are interested in Lowry, like Minnesota, OKC, Pelicans, and Spurs, all have, and the Mavericks are another team, all have kind of decent power forwards that they can bring back that fit the BYC rules and everything. So what's your take on the Lowry situation?
Yeah, I think, with every day that passes by, that qualifying offer looks more and more likely, which I still can't wrap my head around. It would just be too awkward. Lowry is not a boat rocker, so he would show up, like he would do his job, he would go to work, and as we talked about, this is a guy that really the expectations are what have failed him in terms of his time in Chicago, because just looking at like the stuff that I wanted to see him prove this year, obviously he fell short in a lot of areas, but as a shooter, I mean, for him to be a 40% 3-point shooter on 7 attempts a game, that's still a really, really useful skill.
Absolutely.
Especially in the kind of role that he would be asked to play with this team. So do I think the silhouette of a 7-foot tall, 40% 3-point shooter that can do, that has, hints of skill sets in other places, and obviously defensively it would be an issue, but is that silhouette of a player useful to this team? Yes, but the context makes it so tricky for me. I am a little surprised with how hardball the Bulls are playing this similarly, just because it seems in the best interest of all parties for this to cease and for Lowry to get his fresh start and the Bulls to recoup anything they can. I mean, I'd be shocked if they get a first-round pick for him at this point. I guess I'd be shocked if they pulled off 3 sign-in trades and DeMar DeRozan and Lonzo Ball were Bulls. You know, I would have said that 2 weeks ago. So, who the hell knows? But yeah, I just think the longer it drags on, KC has reported that the Bulls have been presented with sign-and-trade, structures for Lowry, and clearly there hasn't been one that was appealing enough to bite on immediately. So I think that's probably what Lowry was referencing. This is speculative, but that's probably what he was referencing when he said to the finished publication that there were offers on the table. But at the end of the day, the Bulls are just kind of, to me, seems to just be playing their leverage for as hard and for as long as they can, because with cap space completely dried up outside of, I think, OKC, they need to cooperate in anything that Lowry wants to do. So my take on it is I still think that a breakup is what suits both parties best. It's unfortunate. But the long-term salary thing, I get it because they're going to be really, really up against it in terms of the tax next year. And, we still don't know how this new Bulls regime is going to approach the luxury tax. I mean, their aggression and assertiveness, like with offseason moves to this point, would indicate that they're not too concerned about it. But, you got to see it to believe it for obvious reasons. So I get it from that perspective. But like you said, Chris, like you just look at teams like Dallas, like if Maxi Kleber or Dorian Finney-Smith is on the team,
please.
Like my God. Like
Maxi Kleber would be so good.
The problem is though, like I just don't know exactly at what level these other teams value Lowry, like thinking that you're going to get a guy like that or like a PJ Washington or anybody like that. It's probably more wishful thinking than reality. So we'll see. I mean, I've been for the last couple of weeks, I've been or I guess it feels like weeks, but it's really been days. I've been on the train where if you can get any form of draft capital back for Lowry, it's probably worth it to do. But at the end of the day, like if the Bulls think they can just play this out and back him into the corner of the qualifying offer, and then you fill your backup power forward need, and you just hope that he's a professional about it, it's not ideal, but at this point, I wouldn't have said this a couple days ago, but at this point, it's a scenario that I could see happening just because with every day that passes with this stalemate, I mean, who knows?
Yeah, it's a tough situation. But at this point, I'm like looking at Torian Prince because he's on a 1-year deal. And I'm looking at Marvin Bagley, and I'm like,
What do you guys think of Bagley? I'm sure you've watched more of Bagley than I have.
He's definitely struggled. He has not lived up to expectations, but he's definitely one of those needs a change of scenery guys.
Yeah.
He has not impressed on the defensive end, but he's got a lot of tools that I think could be utilized. I think he would be a downgrade from Lowry as far as you said, kind of the silhouette fit.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, I think he'd be motivated to be a lot better this year and prove his worth. Whereas Lowry would kind of almost be the opposite, be like, screw these guys, I'm out of here.
Here's the thing about the Lowry thing. If you send him to Sacramento to go play with Darren Fox or Tyrese Halliburton, or you send him to Dallas to play with Luka, like I could just see the Bulls fan tweets in 4 or 5 months when he plays with a guy like that that's going to create such easy offense for him. But I would root for that for Lowry, to be honest with you, because the context here, as much as he did show the tantalizing flashes at times, the context here for any of these guys developmentally has just not been good for the last 2 or 3 years. So it'd be interesting.
So I just have one more question for you. So if you're a Bulls fan, a casual fan, and you're just looking at all these signings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are we finding out about what AK values in a basketball player in your eyes?
Yeah, there are going to be a couple buzzwords at the beginning of this thing, but I'll try to dig past them. But like versatility, multi-positionality, like a lot of these guys from Lonzo to DeMar, I guess Vooch you wouldn't call multi-positional, but certainly versatile. Just because he's such a good facilitator, but also such a good post-up player, also such a pick and pop threat. Zach, I mean, I look at this team and I just see so many, like we were talking about earlier, gifted passers, gifted playmakers, high field guys, especially offensively. Clearly, they value the offensive side of the ball more than the defensive side of the ball. I think we could pretty say
Denzel Valentine.
They value shooting, obviously. Now, Arturas said when he came here that he valued high pace, which makes sense. It's an aesthetically pleasing style, and it was a style that was working for them offensively at the front half of last year. The Vooch acquisition kind of mucked that up, and Billy said at his exit interview he kind of looked inward and was reflective about that, kind of like, man, did it really serve us best to grind the offense to a halt pace-wise after he came, and how can I maybe do that differently? The Lonzo acquisition to me screams that they want to balance that out a little bit more. So stylistically, I think, there's stuff there to pick at. And then in terms of philosophy, just like, obviously they want to win yesterday. They want, when they talk about elevating the franchise. Now, I don't know what the results of it are going to be, but certainly, they came in as having the reputation of being kind of deliberate, thoughtful, think through every decision and are calculated with it. Like you saw that in the way that the gym firing dragged out, and the way that they treated last
Happy anniversary, by the way.
Yeah, isn't that funny? I would have never thought that until I saw. And Jim was never. And this is no disrespect to Jim for me, because he's nothing but respectful to me. But I saw that tweet today, and I was like, oh my god, a coach firing tweet got like 31,000 likes. Like I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before from a team account. So that was a trip down memory lane today. But yeah, exactly. Like the AK fan club says, aggressive and deliberate. From the way they treated last offseason to now, it's basically been a situation where they took half a season to evaluate and have been nothing but have done nothing but nuke the NBA transaction log since then.
I told Will Gottlieb last week, I said, man, look, in a way, I'm kind of happy we got a guy that's tampering. Like I'd rather have that guy than the guy that's like, we're just gonna go get Jabari Parker and maybe he's a 3 and we'll figure it out that way. Like, hey, brother, just don't get caught. But they got caught. But shit, I mean, still,
we'll see what happens. It's all allegedly until it's not.
Right.
But then the one other thing I'd say philosophically for them is like they're very intentional about when they see a weakness. Like they just really specifically address it. Like, I remember AK talking about like toughness and mental fortitude and resilience at the deadline, and bringing in a guy, not only who they traded out, guys like Wendell, but just the ups and downs that he seemed to have in his head, like clearly swapping him out for, a Vucevic, a Tice. Like there was real intention there to me, or at least I read it that way. Even like Javonte Green, who's now back. Think about how much Billy talked about the point of attack defense last year. And then you go out and you sign a guy in Caruso who might be the best at that very specific skill in the NBA. We talked about the pace thing. You go out and get a guy like Lonzo Ball. You talk about the turnover problem and the need for a responsible half-court playmaker that you can surround guys with and, just trust to organize an offense and, like I said, do it in a responsible way. DeMar DeRozan, like it is just, I don't know if because I've only ever covered the previous regime and this regime, but it just is kind of interesting to see them very clearly hone in on and target these very specific areas of weakness and address them very intentionally. So those are all things that we can learn from. They've obviously emptied the chest a little bit asset-wise, but if they've shown anything this offseason where I just didn't think they had much to work with to improve the team, and then they've completely reshaped the roster in just like a revolutionary way, in a way that, Larry, you might have to get a picture of JJ Polk behind you there at a certain point. You might have to build him a shrine once they get all the transactions ordered.
Seriously.
That's something that I wrote recently, was just no matter what the future outlook is asset-wise, like they've shown this offseason that there's a level of creativity and boldness here that you got to have a certain level of confidence that they're going to be able to maneuver their way through things in the future here. So it's a lot to take away, but those have kind of been the things that have stood out to me, which is so funny because a year ago this time, I mean, there still is an enigmatic and mysterious kind of quality to AK in a lot of these guys. But we've certainly learned a ton about them in the last 12 months. Whereas a year ago when we were thinking of Jim Boylan getting fired, I feel like we were still kind of feeling him out and didn't really know what to expect.
For sure. Those are great insights. I completely agree. He's very targeted, very deliberate, and he clearly does not care that much about cap space or picks or
draft,
money.
Yeah.
They just, who cares? They want to win. They want to win, and they're acting like a big market team. So that's been the criticism, the major criticism that I've seen since these moves have been taken, and it is that they're going all in on a second round exit tops, right? That's kind of been the criticism, and the defense has been one of the things that's been talked about. The last question I want to ask you is about their cap space is a myth. That's right. we're real hoopers. Don't care about cap space. Cash considerations have never gotten a bucket in the NBA. Neither have picks. So what I want to ask you is, where do you see us stacking up in the East this year? And do you think we have limited ourselves for the future, or do you think we still have a lot of possibilities to expand and continue to build on this team?
Yeah. So in terms of stacking up in the East, I mean, nobody thinks they've broken into the Milwaukee-Brooklyn tier. I mean, that's just a class of their own. I would still put even kind of like the 1B tier of teams, Philadelphia and Miami, as probably a step above in championship equity, at least. I mean, regular season, especially with those two teams, anything can happen injury-wise. So, you got to see how the standings shake out. But come playoff time, I would put those two teams pretty firmly ahead of them. And then I just think there's this nebulous tier of Boston, Atlanta, the Bulls, and I'm missing someone. Oh, and the
Knicks.
The
maybe
Knicks,
maybe even the Hornets can slip in there.
And the Pacers haven't gone anywhere quietly.
That's right.
The East
Rick Carlisle,
I mean,
coach.
Come at me if I'm wrong, but I think the Wizards got pretty substantially better this offseason. The East is all of a sudden not only top heavy, but deep. So there'll be a lot of teams snapping at their heels too. But I think, 4 to 7 feels like a fair range for this team, just with the amount of experience and the amount of offensive firepower. I think over the course of a regular season slate, that'll play. And in terms of being hamstrung for the future, I think they are, just because they can't, other than on draft night in 2022 and 2024, I actually don't think they're allowed to trade a future first round pick at all.
Not until after they actually pick the guy.
Exactly.
Yeah, they could trade it.
So, I mean, that certainly hamstrings you a bit, just in terms of because they've shown that they're not afraid to leverage those picks into improving the talent base. But in terms of reshaping the roster or reworking things once again, I mean, the notion that there's any untradeable contract, I see that notion about the DeRozan deal, the notion that there's any untradeable contract in the NBA at this point. I mean, look at what the Wizards have done think about where they started with the John Wall deal to where they are now. There's certainly ways for them to maneuver in the future. Now, in terms of jumping into the market for, the next disgruntled megastar, I think they're a little bit, hamstrung there. But at a certain point, I get it, and I'm the first one to nitpick individual transactions, but I do also see the bigger picture of, at some point you just got to get yourself in the game, right? You have to take a step forward to continue, building on that in the future. So, I don't think they would be in the Damian Lillard chase or anything equivalent to that, as those kinds of things play out in future years. But I don't think they're completely inflexible. This offseason would have told me that. The other thing in terms of the future that I'd be honed in on too, is the Zach LaVine stuff, right? I mean, he didn't get his extension this offseason. I think that if you weren't going to clear out the cap space to do that, I think they did the next best thing, which was reaffirm their commitment or their valuing of him by surrounding him with talent that's going to, you would think, lead to a jump in the win column this year. So I don't necessarily read anything into that in terms of Zach not being a Bull past this year, but he is still the best player on the team, and he is still only under contract for one more season. Then he's an unrestricted free agent. So I think that ratchets up the intensity of expectations for this year, because to me, if there's one guy from this core that you want to lock in long term, it's Zach. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think this year is going to say a lot about the ceiling of this team. I'm not willing to put a ceiling on them until I see it in action. And then how things ripple from there, primarily with the Zach thing, will say a lot about what they're able to do in years going forward.
Man, spitting nothing but facts, man. Nothing but facts. Man, I'm just so excited for this team, man. I haven't been. I don't want to be, so hyperbolic, but
Let's see it. See Red Laro. Let's do this.
I haven't
We've
been this
waited long
excited,
enough.
man, since D Rose years, man. Like this is like DeMar DeRozan is on the Bulls. Like Lonzo Ball, somebody that I followed a lot, like is on the Bulls. Like finally having point of attack defense and Alex Caruso. Like this is crazy. I'm just like, I'm just ready to see this. And like you said, you don't want to put it a ceiling on them. But at the same time, I'm trying to like gauge like what is too much, what is, so it's like I'm just super excited, man. As a basketball fan that truly watches like the roles, the different types of things that it takes to win basketball games. Like I feel like they're really hitting those things, and obviously defense is gonna be tricky, but we'll see how it goes, man. We'll see.
Yeah, you got to put that comment up by Ross. This is true. The AK fan club stuff was mostly jokes, but now it could be real. It could be real. And I think, Rob, you kind of touched on this a little bit. It's all because of Zach LaVine and the player he's become over this last year. If he had been not an all-star, he hadn't taken this jump, I think we might have seen a different direction here. But they've gone all in on making sure that he's got the best talent around him, and you got to respect it. So we've kept you for an hour. We appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much for coming on Bulls 101. If you guys do not follow Rob, please follow him on Twitter at Rob_Schaefer. And he's on NBC Sports Chicago, the Bulls Talk podcast. Check out his writing. Rob, you're a rising star, and we're so happy to have you on, and it's great to have you. Thanks so much for coming on, man.
It was an absolute pleasure. Look forward to doing it again, and look forward to keep following you guys. I realized when you DM me that I like somehow didn't follow either of you guys, even though you're like two of the most common people that pop up on my timeline on a daily basis.
Probably you didn't realize, yeah.
So
hey, that makes me feel good, brother. Hey, all right.
Yeah, we're finding hot tweets all the time. That's why it's showing up, guys. It's
my Brussels sprouts tweets. You know what I mean?
Hey, man. Here's what I'll say about Brussels sprouts: saute them, a little balsamic, a little. If you can get bacon, I like to fry bacon and toss them in there too.
Okay.
And I had a buddy in college who was from New Hampshire, and his family made their own maple syrup, and he would bring habanero maple syrup to school. And if you drizzle a little bit of that, like get a little bit of kick, I'm telling you, hop in my DMs anytime. I got Brussels sprouts tips.
You got recipes.
And
I might have to do that. I might have to do that, man.
It's the go vegetable to me, and under discussed.
Wow.
Okay, we got to have you on again just to talk about food now.
Seriously, it's like you and Mark Schindler, like we gotta, hey, we might have to do this.
Mark's wild, man. Mark's wild.
Yeah, I can't take some of the stuff.
Talk about a rising star, but my God, I will say the one thing I'm from Connecticut originally, a suburb just outside of New Haven. I think is one take that he had that I just absolutely loved was his anti deep dish take. I love that. I think if you build it as lasagna, like I'd be totally down with it. But to build it as pizza and then it comes out and it's just a block of like hot cheese and sauce, it honestly disgusts me. So
Lara's gonna have to edit out his previous praise. Now
this is what you guys told me with the live show. I was like, I'm gonna be able to sneak some stuff in here.
Yes, sir.
Oh my gosh, man. All right. Well, that take can, it's out there now. So, whatever.
Now you really see.
I enjoy all pizza.
Really seeing red, yeah.
All pizza. Yeah, Laro is now seeing red. So, all right, boys. Thanks so much. Thanks for the comments, AK Fan Club, Vincent, Baki. Drew. You guys are all here. I'm surprised Salim wasn't here. Salim's our like number one guest. He's always here.
Seriously, yeah.
So. Love Salim. I always love going on with him and Edward, man. Yeah, they're
we're me and Salim are actually going to the Chicago Sky game tomorrow. So.
Oh, nice.
Support them. Yeah, we're go watch some good Sue Bird and Stewie.
UConn legends, baby. UConn legends.
Yes.
It'll be a good game.
Candace. It's going to be fun, man. It's going to be real fun.
We'll see you at Summer League tomorrow, though. I expect reporting. I expect minute by minute 3-point shooter alerts. all the stuff.
If I could get him out from under KC, if his stream is a couple minutes behind or a couple seconds behind, that'd be
He's
great.
always ruining my games. My stream's always behind him. He's like, "Oh, he hits the final shot." I'm like, "No, turn off your tweets." Kills me.
Yeah,
love it. All right, let's let Rob go. We gotta go. See you guys later. See you next week.
Good talking to you guys.